Right, everyone. Am I audible? Am I visible? It's a bit of a new platform. Okay, so the broadcast is live, everyone. I would like to wish you all a very good evening. And on behalf of Western Business School, I welcome you and warmly so to this discussion on marketing principles in the global environment. Today, we will be looking at what it means to survive in the international business scene. We should also be looking at a couple of the foundational rubrics from the marketing aspect, as well as some real world examples of companies that have put in work using these models. So, before we dive in, I believe introductions are in order. So I will be a moderator for today. My name is Aditya Bhargav, and the panel today, along with me, we are all in our final year of our Masters in Management Studies, majoring in marketing. So we have with us an alphabetical order. I'd like to welcome Ishani Vuttu, Kushbu Patel, Nikhil Hirani, Shimona Pinjani, and lastly, Vipin Gulve. Thank you all for connecting with us, and let's hope for a very fruitful panel discussion today. So I'd like to get the ball rolling by saying that the novel coronavirus, the conditions we are living in today, it serves as a reminder to us all that stability is indeed a very fickle thing. If you look at the market conditions today, which used to change at the drop of a hat routinely, they have dealt a serious blow to a lot of industries. Companies have been forced to cut back on their operations and have been forced to see the importance of having the change mentality and also inculcate significant adaptability just to ensure that they keep pace with what's happening in the business environment. So, in that vein, I would like to invite our first panel member for the day, Nikhil, to talk about what exactly it means to conduct business in the VUCA world, as we call it. You have the line, Nikhil.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're
Okay.
audible, Nikhil.
Yeah. So, Aditya, as you rightly said, the world is ever changing. But today, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has changed significantly. And in the management theory, we can see that COVID-19 pandemic is a case of prime case of VUCA. So, coming to the term and the acronym, we are living in a world which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Hence, the term VUCA, VUCA. Now, where does the term actually come from? VUCA is an acronym which was first used in 1987, and it is based on the leadership theories of Warren Bennis and Bert Manus. And as it is with all management theories and practices, it originated first from military use. It was the response of the U.S. Army War College after the collapse of USSR, that is Soviet Union, in the early 1990s. And suddenly there was no longer the only enemy, resulting in newer ways of seeing and reacting. So VUCA states that there is no one right standard or one right management tool for organizations. Every organization needs to adapt itself accordingly to its internal and external environment. As future managers and leaders, we need to not only adjust to the new normal, but also thrive in it. So coming to the markets, I would say that companies can survive in the market with the VUCA world with the help of 7 Ps. The 7 Ps model was originally devised by E. Jerome McCarthy and published in 1960 in his book Basic Marketing, a managerial approach. This includes the 4 Ps that we have learned since our graduation days, that is, product, price, place, and promotion, and the three extended service mix Ps added by Booms and Pitna, that is, people, which was earlier known as participants, processes, and physical evidence. The key difference here is that the 4 Ps were designed at a time where businesses were more likely to sell products rather than services, and the role of customer service in helping brand development wasn't so well known. Today, it is recommended that the full 7 Ps of the marketing mix are considered when doing competitive strategies, and these 7 Ps today are referred to as 7 Ps framework for the digital marketing mix.
Right, right. Great explanation, Nikhil. A follow up question, if I may. So, one of the main frameworks in marketing is the 7 Ps of marketing, the 4 Ps from the product mix and the three extended Ps from the service marketing mix. So, Could you give us an example of how companies apply the 7P principle to their international business operations?
I would love to. So the prime example that comes to my mind right now is about Nike. So Nike or Nike Incorporated, as we all know, it is an American multinational corporation which is engaged in development, design, manufacturing, and worldwide marketing and sales of footwear, apparel, accessories, and services. And the company is headquartered in the Portland metropolitan area of the United States. Coming to the 7Ps that we were talking about, the 7Ps applicable here would be product, which obviously includes our footwear, apparel, swimwear, and now includes maternity wear as well. When it comes to pricing, Nike sells its products under premium pricing. When it comes to place, here I would like to give a special mention here. So Nike sells its products and services through offline and online channels, which includes retail stores and e-commerce sites such as Amazon.com. But I would like to particularly talk about Nike's e-commerce site. So as per the video dated 22nd September 2020 on CNBC television, the video is available on YouTube as well. Uh, Nike is expected to return to profit as online sales and demand from North America and China pick up. So Nike's digital sales have increased 82%, with double-digit increases across North America and Greater China. And the company reported net income of $1.5 billion, which is up from 11% last year. We can see that the company has used the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to accelerate its digital business, and its women's apparel division grew by nearly 200%. Today, as parents stock up on back-to-school items and business just picked back up quite significantly in key markets like China, Nike said that its Jordan brand is looking stronger than ever. The company also offered a fresh outlook for fiscal 2021, expecting sales to be by up high single digits to low double digits from a year earlier. The outlook comes at a time, when many of its rivals are avoiding financial guidance, and the latest results that we see are a strong reversal for Nike after it experienced a bigger slump last quarter. At the end of June, Nike reported an unexpected loss as its revenue tumbled 38% year over year, hurt, hurt by the temporary closure of stores during the COVID-19 pandemic. But as the example said before, the pandemic is clearly accelerating Nike's digital potential. The company has said that its digital sales now make up at least 30% of its total quarterly sales. That we can say it's one third of its total sales. A threshold or a deadline Nike had previously aimed to hit by 2023. So the biggest shoemaker in the US, that is Nike, has been investing in its website, mobile apps, and own stores as more consumers to clear of departing clear stay clear of departing stores and shopping malls. It has been opening sprawling flagship locations in major markets as well as small format shops to serve as pickup hubs for online orders. Its investments are helping fuel its relative strength compared with other retailers which have been hit hard by the pandemic. Dozens of retailers include in the US, including Brooks Brothers, J. Crew, J.C. Penney, and Neiman Marcus, have filed for bankruptcy protection this year. So coming to other P's, I would like to talk about promotion as well. So Nike's promotion, that is which includes its swoosh logo and the tagline or the slogan "Just Do It," differentiate it from others and give the brand a distinctive identity in the crowd of brands, which it leverages to generate sales. So we can say that Nike has a great brand equity. It gains a lot of publicity from news resources. The brand also promotes itself through a mix of online and offline channels, and also sells its products through these channels as well. Apart from that, Nike uses sponsorship of sports events and sports personalities for the promotion of its products. When it comes to people, as of 2020, Nike employed up to 75,400 people, and Nike, invests in its people to help them find faster career growth and development. When it comes to processes, Nike has outsourced nearly all of its you can say production to external manufacturing, to external suppliers and contract manufacturers, particularly in countries like Vietnam, China, and Bangladesh. It leaves the company free to focus on all the essential business processes. Nike, invests significant sum each year to marketing as well as R&D, that is research and development, to achieve more growth. When it comes to the last P, that is physical evidence, we can see that apart from its products and the physical infrastructure of the organization, The company's packaging, which prominently features its logo, that is the Swish logo, is also the physical evidence of its business operations. So Nike is primarily a physical business, and therefore you will come across a lot of physical evidence when navigating its business system. So I hope that through this example, we can see how a high-profile international brand has been able to adjust to the completely changed market conditions and make a profit using the seven Ps in the VUCA world.
Right, right. Thank you, Nikhil. Great example, what you talked about Nike there, and how they have been able to harness sort of an opportunistic quality almost to the brand that even within this pandemic they have still managed to stay afloat somehow. But again, Nike is an international brand, and I would now like to look a little closer to home. Well, let's have a look at our very own homegrown brand of Tata. Now, Ratan Tata is, as you all know, he's not just famous within consumers, but also among the industry circles as a man of impeccable character. And it shows in Tata's businesses, in the promotion strategies, in the products. If you remember, the tagline for Tata Salt was Tata Namak, Desh Ka Namak. Their service offering, look at TCS. TCS has famously refused to lay off employees during the pandemic, unlike a certain other leading tech consultancy company, which I would not like to name right now, but it has been forced to lay off around 25,000 employees, if I remember correctly, and 10,000 of them were from India. So the point I'm trying to make is that both these brands, Tata and Nike, they have applied in bits and pieces the parts of 7P framework very well to the business ideologies. So, if we think about the same company applying this principle in the home market as well as internationally, then one would surmise that there have to be significant differences between the two scenarios. So, I would actually like to bring in Vipin here. Vipin, what are your views on these two different scopes of application of the same framework?
Yes, Aditya, there is a huge difference in company's marketing mix or the 7Ps, as we say, while carrying out its domestic operations compared to its international operations. Let me give you an example of one of the most successful companies in the world, that is McDonald's. The major P that contributes for McDonald's success is product. McDonald's product strategy focuses on adaptation rather than standardization. That is, they target market or their local market. They study their target market or local market carefully while carrying out their international business. McDonald's was founded in America, and initially they used to sell hamburgers, cheeseburgers, French fries, and Coke. Over the time, they have customized their products and have kept increasing their product portfolio. Now, before I talk about customization, Nikhil, since you were talking about Nike, can you shed a light on how Nike is handling the customization part globally?
Sure then. So coming to the example that I gave before, and I would like to continue from that as well. So Nike has focused on customer satisfaction and customization since a long time. So Nike was one of the first brands to venture into the world of personalization when it launched Nike ID in the year 2000. Its customization offering has since grown from just being a feature on its website to include over 100 in-store studios all around the world. And it recently rebranded Nike ID to Nike by You in 2018. So what exactly is Nike ID or Nike by You? It's basically you can customize your Nike shoes. Any shoe that you order online, you can customize its logo, its color. You can even customize its material as well, and you can use recyclable material to produce manufacture your own shoes as well. Although I would say these shoes are highly expensive. Nike also launched the world's first self-lacing shoe for retail, that is Nike Hyper Adapt 1.0 or Nike Adapt in December 2016. A new version, which was designed especially for basketball players, Nike Adapt BB, was launched in January 2019, and it offered a customizing option at the touch of a button at the side of the shoe or in the Nike Adapt app on our smartphone devices. So adapt series of shoes allow us to customize the focus of tightness on our shoes as well as the color and lights by pressing the button on the side of the shoe or as well as the Nike Adapt app as well. And the new version Adapt BB 2.0 was released on 16 February 2020, carrying over the same features as well.
Very right, Nikhil. The Hyper Adapt shoes were featured in the movie, if you remember, Back to the Future. So we can say that we are living in the future now. Coming back to McDonald's, their burgers were made out of beef or pork meat in most of their overseas operations. But the major challenge when they entered in the Indian market was they found out that beef and pork is completely banned in India, and they didn't want to lose an opportunity to succeed in the Indian market, looking at the large market size and also the majority of population being the youth. So they developed a completely new vegetarian product here, that is the Makalu Tikki, which is doing wonders for them even today. McDonald's also observed that Indians have a price sensitive mentality, and hence they have dropped their product prices by 25% in India compared to its international prices. Also, they wanted to attract the middle class audience of the country into their stores, and they succeeded in doing so by placing their stores strategically throughout the country. Now, when I say strategically placed stores, let me give you an example here. If you ever happen to travel towards Ghodbunder Road in Thane, there are two McDonald's stores found, one at the entry and one towards the exit, which is just 15 minutes travel distance between the two. Now, when you compare this to its rival, that is KFC, it has only one store and it is also placed in some corner which is not easily accessible even for its loyal customers. Now, when you go to their domestic operations, that is in America, similar type of strategy can be observed. For example, in the city of Manhattan on the Third Avenue street, you can find two of its closest stores, that is, they are just 500 meters apart. This strategy makes them easily accessible to the customers and has been one of their major strengths in India and all around the world. McDonald's gives its customers a great ambience, and they have a high priority towards maintaining a hygienic environment for them, making the services more customer oriented. They have trained their staff to create and maintain a happy environment, and also treat their staff with utmost respect, which is then transferred to the customers. Now this is observed globally, and it is a winning strategy for them. You can see McDonald's promoting their products throughout the year over print media and also TV commercials. I'm talking about India, that is. But when you go to the domestic country, that is in America, they have a home country advantage over there, and also less risks are involved with it. So they promote their brand at major sporting events like NBA, NASCAR, etc., by setting up their stores at those events. Coming back to India, a huge number of Indian populations watch their sports, daily soaps, and media on TV, and that is the reason they promote their products through TV commercials. So to sum it up, adaptation of the local market has been the key strategy for McDonald's to succeed in the international markets.
Really interesting example you've given there, Weapon, of McDonald's. It just goes to show the sheer amount of decisions that company has to take, and not just decisions, but also decisional correctness, might I say. But then again, just like Nike, McDonald's is another global giant in the quick service restaurant industry. Now, if we talk about companies on the other end of the spectrum, companies which appear on shows like Shark Tank in America, or its Australian counterpart Dragon's Den, these startups, they have their own set of challenges, of course. Those of our viewers who watch the shows I have mentioned might recollect that most of the questions that the judges, the sharks, ask are about the product, to the tune of if they have a design patent, a usage patent, how many sales have you made, how much inventory do you have, do you regularly have stockouts, and the like. So it's mostly product centric in nature, what these judges are looking for from startups. So I'd like to ask you now, Kushbu, do these startups have it a bit easier as they mostly focus on products? And in most countries, indeed, you have an ecosystem that helps their rise along these lines. Or do you still have to look at the business from all sides?
Yes, Aditya, I do believe the existence of startup ecosystems required as startups are blooming all over the globally. Entrepreneurs do need a supportive environment to launch startups that could one day have an impact not only on the local economy but globally too. Basically, startup ecosystems is a network consisting of support by community of people, organizations, and other startups that surround them. The members of startup ecosystem work together to foster innovation in their local community. These members consisting of educational institutes, agencies, incubators, corporations, media, and even government Government do play a vital role in invigorating entrepreneurs to find the boom element for their businesses. In the past few years, government support to startups have been multiplied immensely, which has acted as a catalyst to the innovative approaches we see these days. Apart from this, there is something which is inexorable, which is the time a company puts forth in its learning. Gaining knowledge over recurring questions like how to develop a product, how to frame pricing models, finalizing distributional channels, or which promotional channels to be used. This could act as an advantage for the firms while establishing business in international markets. We can observe how real-time analysis of the marketing mix helps a new entrant firm succeed in international business in the case of HubSpot. Anyone amongst us aware about HubSpot?
Yes, Khushbu. HubSpot is basically an American software developer. They create softwares that allow their customers to promote and market their products and services using tools such as search engine optimization or other social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you, Shivana. So, yes, HubSpot was started off by MIT graduates. Their target was to penetrate international markets. They were basically challenging the traditional marketing methods and were going all out with their new digital marketing services. Inbound marketing, the word itself coined by HubSpot, had cleared out their product offerings. What HubSpot was not clear about was their customer base. After taking off the product section from the marketing mix strategy they had adopted, their focus now was on the people section. Initially, they were providing the same standardized services at the same rates to all the customers, but this didn't work out in their favor. The need to understand their customer was highlighted to them soon enough. Conducting huge scale market research had led them to differentiating their customers based on two broad parameters: small business owners and marketing professionals. HubSpot focused on growing market by serving both B2B and B2C clients in many different industries. Once they had uncovered who they were going to market to, they had to define pricing structure that met customer demand and the sensitivity of price in the market. Deciding to set up customized pricing based on the demands and needs of their customers, they successfully had perfected their pricing model. In service industry, the physical evidence section is always problematic. To overcome this factor, HubSpot portrayed itself to be feedback oriented. They created communities where customers using their products could comment on their experiences and add their feedback to it. This earned HubSpot credibility in the consumer minds about its reliability and usability. But the biggest challenge of promotion still standing mountain high in front of them. They needed to decide whether or not to supplement their inbound marketing campaigns with traditional efforts. Deciding against using the traditional methods, they believed that producing content and getting people to your website through the content you create will generate more quality leads at a lower cost. And of course, what would be a better example for a digital marketing service provider company to thrive using its own created platform? Hence, Aditya, we can infer that the learning which HubSpot has observed would be irreplaceable by any other company. This is how companies spread out in different industries. As each and every market vary, which has been well highlighted by Vipin and Nikhil, each companies need their own set of learning experiences which will make them grow.
Right, Kushbu. Very enlightening indeed. And I really like that even in this example, you highlighted the importance of the keyword ecosystem that I mentioned at the start. That is what elevates countries like China, which are considered to be a haven for companies that are looking to practice industrial indulgence, if I might say so, to a different level of appeal for these countries. Now, India, on the other hand, has long since been seen as an industry that thrives on the basis of services. And in services, when we talk about services, the element of personalization, which involves knowing your customers, comes as very key here. This is where the topic of consumer research comes in, because in this day and age, having data on your consumers is considered to be worth its weight in gold. Companies spend so much time, so much money knowing the consumers. They make such massive investments on both fronts that it is honestly scary, to say the least, if it all goes wrong and all of that investment goes down the drain. So, Shimona, I'd like you to explain to us just what is the extent of importance that is accorded to this very basic step when it comes to understanding consumer behavior. Over to you, Shimona.
Right, Aditya. So, as basic as it sounds, consumer research, it is extremely very crucial for any company. When consumers purchase a product, they are not just purchasing a product, but they are basically placing their trust with the company. Over the past 2 decades, the face of the world consumer has truly changed. Goods are now more available. The information about these goods are now more easily accessible and open. And the availability of goods from any corner of the world has become super easy. So as a result, international marketing is more important now than ever before. Here is when I would like to highlight the importance of consumer research. Acknowledging the preferences and requirements of your consumers is where consumer research plays a very, very prominent role. The consumer research largely helps in understanding consumer demands, consumer behaviors, and then based on these behaviors, one can formulate the strategies that can best suit the particular target audience of a group of consumers.
Shimona, so sorry to interrupt you. I believe there is a little bit
Yeah.
of disturbance maybe on your end. Would the other panel members please confirm? Is it maybe not on my end, or are you having some disturbance as well?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
Aditya.
there's a
There is
Okay, okay,
some
okay, okay.
Okay,
Okay,
let's see.
Shimona, can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah. Am I audible better now?
Okay, yeah. It's much better. It's much better. It's much better.
Apologies
Yeah. So
for the
you,
same.
no worries. You can continue. You can continue.
Yeah. So basically, acknowledging the preference of consumers is when research plays a key role. Okay. So consumer research largely helps in understanding consumer demands and consumer behaviors. And based on these behaviors, one can formulate strategies around these behaviors which can best suit the particular target audience or that particular group of consumers. So consumer behavior is basically
Okay, Shimona.
no
Shimon, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but the audio issue has recurred.
worries.
I suggest you try reconnecting, and yeah, just see if that problem solves itself later.
Yeah.
Yeah, do try reconnecting. So sorry. So apologies, everyone. So while she reconnects, I'd just like to reiterate on what she was trying to talk about. The part that consumer research, which is where companies start moving a little bit towards consumer centrism. Like now there is, in terms of company orientation, you have product centrism and consumer centrism, of course. So over the past few years, if we observe, the face of the modern consumer has been changing a lot. And when you talk about the recognizability of brands, or brand recall, as we call it in marketing terms, I believe, that is what has emerged as one of the most important things when it comes to marketing. So people these days, if you observe, they lead an increasingly sedentary lifestyle, and all they want is convenience in every form of interaction that they have with any business. What I believe is truly beautiful, though, is that the businesses have also kept pace. They've also evolved the same way that customers have evolved. They've recognized the change in trends, and examples for the same are also abundant. I believe the most relatable of these examples would be that of Lenskart, and how they have successfully managed to integrate technology to allow their potential consumers to just browse the website and try on glasses sitting at home in 3D. All you need to do is just upload one video recording your face from all angles, and just like that, you can see sitting at home if a frame or a glass is a better fit for you or not than others. So this company has clearly understood and indeed demonstrated that understanding of knowing consumers and what they would like. So I am actually looking to bring in another panel member here now that Shimona has unfortunately disconnected, to shed some more light on this topic. I'd like to know Ishani's views on this. Ishani, what do you think about how companies are shifting more towards consumer centrism, and is there a sweet spot between product and consumer orientation?
Yes, Aditya. As you rightly said, the companies are shifting more towards consumer centrism indeed, and I'd like to shift the focus towards this concept, which is on the lines of the 7Ps and consumer centrism and consumer research, as Shimona was about to speak. So this concept is known as the 4 C's concept, and it takes into account the consumer perspective. And just we talk about products more, but this concept talks about consumers in particular, and the consumer side of the marketing mix, from what are their needs, to the cost they incur to buy a product, to their convenience, and lastly to the communication. Now, starting with the first C, which is consumer wants and needs, I'd like to say, while companies are focusing more on its products and what sort of product or service should be offered, a considerable amount of focus should be given to what a consumer actually wants and what a consumer actually needs. Manufacturing products after products and trying to sell these products to consumer without knowing what consumers actually want is, I guess, that's never fruitful for any company in the longer run. I'd like to give an example here of BlackBerry. We all know BlackBerry. BlackBerry was once a leader in the phone segment, and it had the same position and status as Apple today. With its BBM, it was successful in capturing the young teenage market as well as the business segment for which the phones were meant for. But the increasing technological advances and its competitors launching new touchscreen smartphones, BlackBerry was just too stubborn to change. Now, they did not anticipate what, or they did not figure out what the consumers wanted and what innovation they wanted, because the competitors were coming in with touchscreen phones. BlackBerry kept it to heavy and big designs, and such was the case with this model called BlackBerry Privy. Now, BlackBerry Privy had a keyboard as well as it was touchscreen. Now, a touchscreen phone with a keyboard seemed somewhat redundant, and this was the major factor that led to BlackBerry's downfall, and BlackBerry stopped manufacturing its phones in 2018. Moving on to the second part, or the second C of the 4 C's concept, which is cost. Now, cost variable provides more information about the consumer itself, consumers, than the price itself does. Now, many people confuse price and cost. Price is just a small part of the total cost that a consumer incurs. A consumer incurs more than just the price. It can be in monetary terms or in non-monetary terms. For example, we have to go to a store. We spend the time going to the store. We spend the sort of money apart from the price of the product. An example that would be relevant here is of IKEA. Now, IKEA has a strategy of building its stores just on the edge of towns and cities. What happens? Consumers find it pretty inconvenient, but it increases the cost, like the overall cost for the consumer to buy a product. Some customers actually had a problem to go out of the town to go to an IKEA store and buy, because they felt like it was increasing the cost of the product. As we all know that IKEA is a furniture store and it's quite costly. So it overall the cost of the products were increasing for them. But IKEA now has recognized this consumer pain, and they are actually planning on opening 30 more stores in major cities across the globe to reduce that total overall cost for the consumers. And I believe that would also decrease the inconvenience caused to the consumers. Now, when I talk about inconvenience here, I'll move on to the third C, which is convenience. Now, convenience, we all know, is basically the ease of buying a product or a service, and not just the place from where you buy a product or a service, or the distribution of that product or a service. We all know that consumers today are free to visit a physical store, and maybe just not go to a physical store and buy products online. So the shift, there is a change coming in. 9 to 5 shopping is changing completely, and we all know that recent announcement of keeping the malls open 24/7 by the Indian government, that gives a lot of convenience to consumers to go out and buy products or whatever they want at any point of time in a day. Now, an example that I'd like to give here is of Amazon. So, Amazon's mission statement actually states that we strive to offer consumers the lowest possible prices, the best available selection, and the utmost convenience. I'm going to focus on utmost convenience here because we all know that Amazon has branched out to every product possible, from electronics to grocery stores. Now, I do believe that the Amazon is the most convenient company in the world, and many consumers all around the globe believe that. And I believe that the success to Amazon's the secret to Amazon's success is the convenience that it offers to its consumers. From its 2-day delivery options to one-click ordering and easy returns, it provides that sort of convenience to its consumers. I am an Amazon uh, customer, and I can vouch for it that they're best in providing the convenience to its customers. Now, moving on to the last and a very, very important C, which is communication. I believe with the development of internet and social media, communication puts much more broader focus on the entire buying experience. It could actually be better to say that communication works toward establishing a dialogue between a business and a consumer, and it helps in understanding what the consumers want. Now, here I'll give the example of Apple. Okay, so Apple was not into consumer support through social media, and we all know that social media is everyone is on social media, because we, even if we have small issues, we go to social media and we're out there. We are open and bold about it. We are out there. So Apple was very reluctant in going into the social media world, but in 2016, Apple actually decided that it would launch an official Apple Support Twitter account. Here, Apple recognized that the value of giving its customers what they expected, a social media account. And in just 2 months, their followers grew to around 300,000. Now, a very strong pillar of Apple's Twitter communication strategy is to post one tip every day, so that their customers appreciate their products, and they might get to know some feature about their product which they know about earlier. So this strategy of Apple shows that they're not just there to sell their product, or they're not just there to make sales. They actually want to make a valuable connection with their consumers by communicating them, by talking to them one on one, and it gives the customers a sense of belongingness, which we as consumers we all want. Now, to conclude here, I'd say that the 4 C's that I spoke about is a very integral part of the planning and execution process in any business firm. And these 4 C's should not be regarded as the replacement to the earlier 7 P's of marketing that my fellow panelists spoke about. They should be together be used by businesses to balance meeting goals and objectives with responding to the consumer changes and the needs, or whatever consumers want. So they should be together. They should be clubbed together, and then it should be taken into one perspective, and then consumers should be. Yeah, I think you can take it from here.
Definitely, definitely. No, definitely, Ishani. Very, very relatable actually. When you talked about how Amazon looks into its customers very well, and indeed it is famous for its customer support section, way more so than the closest competitor in India, Flipkart, that it has. So I see a little bit of analogy here between how the 4 C's and 4 P's, what would both of them being counterparts to each other. So yeah, great example there. But I'd like you to just hold that thought for a moment while I circumvent back to Shimona. I see she has reconnected. So Shimona, yeah, you're going to talk about how consumer research was important, I believe. So yeah, you have the line, Shimona.
I hope I am audible now.
It is much better than before, but it's still a little bit intermittent problems going on. But yeah, you can take it. Let's see how
Let's
it
just
goes.
hope that my internet supports me today the way our call is supporting us. So yeah, coming back to how important is consumer research. Consumer research basically gives you the foundation you need in order to enter new markets. When you understand how consumers think and feel, it will help understand what finally makes them choose one brand over the another. I would like to share an example of a very, very
Shimona, so sorry to interrupt. Shimona, so sorry to interrupt you. There is still a little bit of the fast forward tape issue. I suggest you try without using the earphones and see if the problem is alleviated.
Yeah, is this better?
Yeah, much better, much better.
Okay. So I'd like to share an example of a very prominent brand, which is Coca-Cola. So in the late 90s, Coca-Cola witnessed a fall in sales of Coca-Cola. And then, okay, Aditya, please unmute yourself. I cannot hear you.
Hello, hello. Yeah, Shimona, you can hear me? I was saying the problem still persists, and I believe while you check out the problem and see how it can be solved, I suggest we move on. So, yeah, coming back to you, Ishani, and what you talked about, the analogy between forces and four Ps, and indeed the example actually that you gave of BlackBerry, that stayed in my mind at the very start when you started speaking, because it reminded me of another tech company that is Nokia. So the failure of Nokia, everybody knows what's coming. The failure of Nokia is it's very well documented, I say, because they were essentially fighting a two-front war with little to no intelligence. They had Google's Android on the software side and the Chinese mass-producing companies, manufacturing companies on the hardware side. Now, the fact that they did not adopt Android right away, like the peers were doing, and rather stubbornly they stuck to Symbian and later merged with Windows, that is widely touted as one of the main reasons for their failure. I believe that perhaps it was also a problem that they mainly failed to preempt the fact that markets had already started moving towards giving the consumer more control. The control to develop your own content, the control to develop your own apps, the freedom to explore your horizons, if I might say so. The more control you give your consumer, the happier he will be, not in just the buying process, as we say, but also in what you're offering them in general. This, I believe, is a great example, a great case study of a blue ocean strategy that Nokia was trying to create, but how it went wrong. So this innovation, whenever we talk about blue ocean strategy, innovation inadvertently comes into the picture. So yeah, so talking about innovation, I would like to bring Khushbu over when I put this question to her again. That how important is it to keep evaluating the 7P framework and putting innovations in a timely manner in international markets? Khushbu.
Yes, Aditya. In today's VUCA world, which has been well defined by Nikhil, top-rated MNCs have acknowledged the fact that globalization is the most critical challenge they face. Most successful international expansion of any company is often predicated on the technological advancements they have gone through. The last century has witnessed some series of explosive innovations which has brought some dramatic results. Virtually, there is an improvement in every dynamic of living, which is the greatest example as to why it is necessary to keep evaluating the marketing mix strategies again and again. It is not necessary for a business to grow better, but it is certainly necessary for a business to grow bigger. By innovation, one doesn't always mean to create some new offerings. They also mean some changing your business model or making changes in the existing environment to deliver better products or services. Classic example to understand the timely need to keep evaluating and innovating would be Gillette. As we know, Gillette is the global leading brand under self-grooming section. Its parent company P&G is a big brand in itself. It's leading the market with around 70% market share. Gillette has never said back. It has always believed in improving itself. Product offerings by Gillette has always been of the best quality, but there came a time where its competitors were able to offer similar products. This had generated a need within Gillette to keep improving itself. Schick, the biggest competitor of Gillette, had started gaining more market share with its cheaper products. To gain a competitive advantage on them, Gillette introduced battery operated razors, which were a bomb. Furthermore, they have targeted the men's segment successfully, but they didn't realize the upcoming need in the women's segment. In today's world, women don't really shy away from the things they need. Gillette had strived to provide its products in the women's market, but that didn't work out in their favor. They had tried to enter the women's market with the tagline Best a Man Can Get. You don't need to be just technologically advanced. You need to match up with the changes in the way of living, changes in the mentalities, and the ever changing power of control. Timely need to keep evaluating the market arises from these changes. Understanding them is very important in the VUCA world and it's the pathway for a successful business working.
Right, right. I fully agree with you there, Khushbu. And indeed, I would like to concur to what you said about achieving success through innovations. I believe that was the gist of your talk. People often talk about doing product innovations, innovations in marketing efforts, branding ideas, and whatnot, about keeping pace with the markets in general. What the markets are doing, what their competitors are doing, even there is so much change all around us all the time. Okay, apologies if I sound a bit philosophical here, but I'd like to quote Arthur Ashe in a very famous saying that I'm sure you all have heard: success is a journey and not a destination. So I believe this is all the more applicable when it comes to the business sphere. One small change, minuscule even, in either the internal or the external environment can lead to a sort of domino effect where the whole tower comes crumbling down. Your whole business empire, years of blood, sweat, and tears, all gone in a flash. So, yeah, with that, we have reached the last segment of today's panel discussion. I see quite a few questions have been popping. Uh, okay, well, okay, this mostly wishes. So, right, I would like to throw open the field for any questions if we might have. Okay, let me just check the time. So, okay, my apologies. I do not believe we will be able to take questions from the audience here. So if anybody has any questions, then you might have seen our contact information going down in a marquee with each of the speakers. We'll also be sharing them later. And in case you have any specific queries or anything else, any topic specific that you need expansion on, then feel free to contact us. And yeah, I fear that is all the time we had. So on that note, I'd like to thank the director of Western Business School, Dr. Satish Modh, and Dr. Kavita Kanabar, who's channeling via you're watching this on right now. Both of them for their unrelenting support throughout this endeavor and indeed for giving us this opportunity. But even more than that, I would like to thank all our viewers for taking the time to come watch us. I hope you found this discussion thoughtful, very insightful. I hope you had some takeaways and maybe found a new angle to look at the market and this world in general. I just like to add a few last words in saying that I hope everyone stays indoors during trying times like these, irrespective of the lockdown status at your area. Just keep yourselves and your loved ones free of the risk and just stay safe. So once again, on behalf of the panel today, I thank you all and bid you adieu.